this is the reporting period for August. There were 167 calls for service, bringing the total up to 1304. 58 this that month for non-billable calls, bringing that up to 377. We had 4 cases that were turned over to detectives for investigation. 8 criminal reports were taken for the month of August, bringing it up to a total of 57. 2 non-criminal, up to 40. 2 accidents, up to 23. And 4 citations were issued in the village, bringing that up to a total of 24 for the year. And addressing the other question about 324, there were many parameters as we talked. We talked for quite a while, probably an hour, hour and a half. So there were a lot of parameters that were involved in why there was no one being charged. And I know you brought up several other ordinances and several other laws, but just for those that are not aware, gentleman went out in his backyard, discharged around, and the road was closed because of the way it was dispatched that shots were fired. Precautionary reasons, the road was closed. They made contact with him when they found out what it was for, that he was clearing it to make sure that it was still a functional weapon. It was not in anger, was not as intoxicated or on drugs or anything that would prohibit a person to bear arms in the state of Ohio. They opted at that point not to charge for anything. Could there have been an inducing panic? It would have never flown, because for an inducing panic, there has to be a violation of the law. There was no violation of the law because he had a legal right to do what he was doing. And I gave you the instance that if I went out in my backyard and shot at a mole as it was going through my yard, I would be fine. The backdrop is the ground, and so forth, so that is okay. As far as a disorderly conduct by causing annoyance or alarm to others, once again, there is no violation of law. So just because you may have been or felt that you were annoyed by the noise or alarmed does not necessarily rise to the level of the charge.
I just have a couple questions. One is the shooting into the ground. And when you say the shooting into the ground, that was his story, correct?
Was the information that was given to me by the officers that investigated it that night.
And in the actual report, there were multiple shots. The ones that were called in, there were multiple shots. And there was a guy that was sitting in his driveway, too afraid to go into his house. I think you and I talked about the fact that there was something about cleaning his gun or something to that effect. And that's why he shot into the ground. That was what I remember of our conversation. Is that still accurate?
The way that it was explained to me was that the weapon was being checked to see if it was still serviceable, whether he had just got done cleaning it or not. So
define serviceable to me, so I understand what you're saying. That it would still continue to shoot? Is that what we're talking about?
That's the way I would look at serviceable.
So it wasn't a misfire or anything
No,
like that?
he intentionally went out there to make sure that the weapon he had was going to do what it was designed to do.
And that's the most appropriate way to do in a residential area?
He has the legal right to do that within the parameters of where he was at, yes.
In a village that has a ordinance that says you cannot do that?
That's right.
There is an Ohio law that supersedes that, which says that he could.
However, in the city of Cincinnati?
The city of Cincinnati is a charter city, and they have the right to enact any law that they so desire. And they have so desired to prohibit the discharge of a firearm within their city.
And so when you take a look at virtually every city that is, village that's in the state of Ohio has a very similar ordinance, okay? And if you go to the Ohio Municipal League, you can find out every single one of them. So what you're saying is that because there's a state law, it says you can do it on your property, which sort of governs the non-residential areas as much as anything, that's a sheriff's department thing, they look at the ORC. But in a village, you usually have a mayor's court, and there's different ways that you can approach that to make sure that's not happening.
I can't do anything about mayor's court.
I understand you can't, but we
that
had a
would be
mayor's,
up to council
we
if
had
they
a mayor's
decided that
court
they wanted
at
to.
one point in time in this village.
And
So Chuck, if I shoot my gun in my backyard, it's okay? Is that what he's saying?
That's sort of the message I'm getting.
We're addressing what Mr. Burkholz asked. It's not a whole debate
I
tonight.
have an important question though.
Can we ask it after, so we can?
Well,
continue the
it's for
meeting?
him.
Go ahead.
Can I ask it? I had a problem with an injured raccoon and I had to call 911 and they came and shot it 3 times. But I was fighting it off with a broom till they got there. I could've went ahead and shot the raccoon?
yes.
Oh, okay, cause my husband was like flipping. I'm like, shoot it. He wouldn't do it. Okay.
I'm glad to know all this.
I thought I'd get in trouble.
Can I ask a
He
clarifying
ended up
question
down
on
at
that,
the park
because
by the river.
there's a looseness to this concept. You've told us that you could, within certain parameters, discharge on your own property,
Correct.
including having the backdrop of the ground.
Correct.
So one could not fire into the woods or necessarily.
No, I mean, you have to have an identifiable backdrop. You can't just indiscriminately shoot, not knowing where the projectile is going to go.
Can we do a target? Can we target practice?
It all depends on where and what you're shooting into. If you have a
Just a target
backdrop,
I'm making?
if you have a backdrop, if you would like somebody to come out and look at what you have as to whether that would be appropriate or not,
Okay,
then yes, you can do that.
okay.
I think when you start shooting,
Alright.
there's gonna be some officers driving at your door, whether you're legal or not. Would that be
Oh, I
fair to
wasn't,
say?
I wasn't gonna go shooting.
No.
I'm just
Well,
asking.
I am.
I get it.
Just want to be clear that there are
What is that
parameters
about?
around what you said.
Correct. There are.
So this is not condoning everyone to go out and just start shooting in the air willy-nilly.
Oh, no,
we're
if
addressing this
you
one
shoot in the
particular-
air, that is not a identifiable backdrop.
This is addressing the one particular issue Mr. Burkholz brought up. Every issue is different.
Correct.
So what this is addressing is the questions here right now. If somebody goes out and does something else tonight, that may be a totally different situation, as is any event that occurs. Not everything is exactly the same. I'll just put that out there.
I have a question for Mr. Carney. The village recently received money from a opioid lawsuit. The state of Ohio got, by Twine, sued drug companies, and the village got a little bit of that money. Do you have any suggestions, since you see what goes on in the village all the time? As
Well-
far as like this money that we got from the opioid lawsuit from the state of Ohio?
Right now, I mean, there are many avenues which we have available for people who have addiction problems and so forth. There's one that the young lady actually lives in the village, and it's through Crossroads Church. It's called the Hope Line. And we're handing out those cards to everyone and anyone. It's not just for those that have addictions of any sort. It's also for those that don't have housing. They'll find the housing and the drug treatment for them. The problem is that nobody wants treatment. Nobody wants to go into housing. So there are hundreds of different programs out there that are willing to put money towards helping the people. It's just until they decide that they want the treatment. So the only thing that we can do as law enforcement is at least get them in front of a judge where probation can make them do certain things.
What about like pets? Are they concerned about their pets?
So, yeah, there are a few that, you know, the housing concerns because they won't house individuals that have pets. The last one, that we have had issues with, he no longer has his dog and he still does not want help. So it's just an excuse, and we're trying to do what we can as far as, getting them the help that they can, you know, that's out there for them. But as far as putting any monies, I would say you would be better off doing something for food, because that seems to be the catalyst that they all are hungry. So,
We haven't received the money yet, it's been pledged. We will, once we're notified, we can take a look at how we can address that.
Yes, sir.
No, it's
Is there
just,
a amount?
yeah, thank you.
We don't
I
have a
just-
definite amount yet either, someone said, there was a report in the paper or a newsletter somewhere that around $3,000, I think, for the village, but there's a 70% and 100%, they're still negotiating because the township didn't get the money they thought they deserved, so as of now, we don't have a number or just the number involved in the class action suit.
I just kind of like people to think about it, you know, like, keep it in the back of our hat, like all of us, to think what we could do to possibly help people with addictions or, homeless or
Well,
whatever, like.
a lot of it has to do too with, it goes hand in hand with the mental, issues that go along with it. That they should be on meds and they're not taking the meds, so they self-medicate. And, so it's just it's a revolving door, unfortunately.
I think you do a great job in the village.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sergeant Carney, may I ask just a couple, two brief questions about this, a follow-up?
It's up to the mayor.
Just wanted to ask the question about if there was a misfire of the gun. This is just a hypothetical. In other words, you know, there's times where the bullet doesn't discharge the weapon. What would be the appropriate way to clear that? In other words, you have a misfire of the ammunition, the bullet doesn't come out.
I mean, the steadfast way is to make sure that depending upon what type of weapon it is, if it's a revolver, you handle it one way. If it's a semi-automatic.
Let's take a revolver.
Okay, so the revolver, you would pop open the cylinder and eject all the cartridges out, and that would be the safe way to do it.
You wouldn't fire the gun.
I don't know what I would have done.
Yeah.
I mean, I may have and I may not have. I mean, because there are bullets, especially in a revolver, that the primer could have been bad. But that doesn't mean that the weapon is not functional. If it's in a semi-automatic and it doesn't discharge, then you have to clear that round out of that weapon before you would be able to cycle another one into it to see if it was going to
What would
work.
be the safe way of doing that?
Taking the magazine out and discharge that cartridge out of the,
But not firing the gun.
it's not, when you say the safe way, if it was illegal, he would have been arrested.
I'm not asking that question. I'm just asking if it had been.
If it was me, yes, that's how I would have done it,
Okay.
all right? But just because he chose to do it the other way does not make it illegal.
I'm not saying it did. I just wanted to know the answer to the question. And then the second one, I can't remember what I was gonna ask you, so I'm done.
It's all right. Well, you know where my
Sound like
office
me,
is.
Chuck.
It's called old age.
Oh, I just wanna interject with a few things that I've heard, that I may be able to help with or get something. I do a big food pantry around the corner. It's actually in Cleves on 128. And would there be any location within the village to set up a food pantry for the local people
We
here?
have one tram, it's up
There
there.
is one currently.
Block.
How accessible is it to people?
It's only open a couple days a week.
We could do
But it
every
is.
day.
So do people, a lot of the population that you're speaking of don't have transportation, and that seems to be a problem for a lot of, like, local people in the village. So what about down in the village somewhere?
This is right in the village, it's right behind our administration building,
Do they have,
College Street.
is there any, I mean, if people are hungry, are they needing to open more often, or do they need more food? I mean, if people
If
are.
we get your contact information, and then we'll connect you with them, and then see where we go from there. Would that work for you?
Well, I mean, I'm just looking for, it don't matter to me, but I have food accessible to communities that can help the situation that the lady spoke of, so.
Do you run the one that's down on 128 on the
Yes.
right-hand side?
Yes,
I'll see,
restoration.
I see cars there picking up things.
So I just
You have a good operation there, even
picked
being
up a
remote
semi of
out there.
marshmallows.
Yeah.
We're trying to get rid of marshmallows. And I also have some flyers here. It's, Living in Testimony, it's a recovery program that I would like to leave for whoever is interested in them. They have, like you said, we will take them in and get them into treatment if they're wanting to go. So I can discuss that with whoever after.
If you'd like to leave them with Mr. Brett,
Yes, I
and
can
if
leave
you
them.
can give him your contact information, we can connect you with Tram.
Actually, I'm already connected with someone from Tram, but it just, if people are needing food, I don't know.